The Pentagon signs classified AI deals with 7 major tech companies. Big tech commits to a staggering $725 billion in infrastructure spending, and Elon Musk faces off against OpenAI in federal court. Welcome to the DJAMGAMIND Weekly Rundown. I am Anna, your co-host. This podcast is researched and produced by Etienne Newman, senior software engineer from Université Laval, based in Calgary, Alberta. Today we perform a forensic autopsy on the week that artificial intelligence collided with the physical world from April 27th to May 3rd, 2026. This week marked a point of no return for the militarization and industrialization of AI. The U.S. Defense Department has officially integrated models from OpenAI, Google, and Microsoft into classified warfighter networks, sparking a massive employee mutiny at Google. At the same time, the financial scale of this technology is breaking the global supply chain. Tech giants are spending so much capital on data centers that Apple's CEO is warning of a RAMageddon, a severe memory chip shortage that is already driving up hardware prices. Meanwhile, the race for physical AI is accelerating. SoftBank is launching a $100 billion robotics firm to build data centers. One is mass-producing humanoid robots in California, and OpenAI is secretly developing a smartphone to rival the one. Before we dive into the data, a quick reminder. Subscribe to DJAMGAMIND on Apple Podcasts to always listen completely ads-free. Today's episode is brought to you exclusively by DJAMGAMIND. When geopolitical tensions rise and tech giants burn hundreds of billions on infrastructure, your enterprise needs flawless technical intelligence. DJAMGAMIND delivers the human-verified audio forensics the C-suite relies on to map out true ROI. Visit jamgamind.com. Let's unravel the week.
Before we begin today's briefing, a note for the brands listening. If you want to reach the true architects of the AI revolution, the technical leaders actually building the stack, not just the tourists, DJAMGAMIND offers select premium partnership opportunities. Let us position your product directly in front of the ultimate technical buyer. Visit jamgamind.com/partners.
So, in 2026 alone, 4 tech companies are projected to spend $725 billion on concrete, copper, cooling systems, and robotics.
Yeah, it's an absolutely insane number.
Right. I mean, just to put that in perspective, that is roughly the entire gross domestic product of Switzerland being spent in a single year. And not on, hiring more software engineers or writing code, but on physical, heavy industrial materials.
Exactly.
So welcome to the deep dive. For the last few years, I think we've all treated artificial intelligence like it's this magic, weightless software just sort of living out in the cloud.
Oh, totally. The infinite cloud.
Right. But based on the massive stack of news we are unpacking today, covering April 27th to May 3rd, 2026, that pure software era is violently over. Today, we are looking at the brutal collision between AI's massive scale and the physical, macroeconomic, and geopolitical world.
It really is a phenomenal reality check. I mean, we spent the early 2020s assuming compute was just this infinite resource, but when you try to bend the physical world to actually support infinite computation, you slam headfirst into supply chain shortages.
Yeah.
You hit macroeconomic friction and, frankly, unyielding national security walls. The underlying theme of this week's news is that intelligence requires a staggering amount of heavy lifting. It requires raw materials.
It does. So by the end of this conversation, you, the listener, are going to understand exactly why your next laptop might cost significantly more. Why tech giants are suddenly rushing to mass-produce humanoid robots, and why the Pentagon is effectively commandeering the frontier of AI development.
It's a lot to cover.
It is. So let's start with that $725 billion number. Big tech, meaning Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and Meta, issued guidance this week for their capital expenditures. And it's a 77% jump from last year.
Which is just a staggering acceleration.
Yeah. Microsoft and Alphabet are each committing $190 billion. I look at those numbers, and I have a really hard time reconciling them with reality. Are we looking at a tech bubble inflating here, or is this, the unavoidable toll for the next decade of infrastructure?
Well, you have to look at what they are actually buying. I mean, they aren't just hoarding GPUs anymore just to do more math. The bottleneck has shifted. We're looking at a constraint that Apple's CEO Tim Cook actually just warned about on their recent earnings call.
Oh, right, the RAMageddon comment.
Yes, RAMageddon, which is honestly an incredibly fitting description. You can have the fastest processor in the world, but to run these massive trillion parameter AI models, you have to hold them in active memory.
Right, the RAM.
Exactly. The AI industry has developed this insatiable appetite for memory chips, and it has already quadrupled global RAM prices. They are just buying up the global supply of memory just to keep their current data centers functioning.
Which has a direct, immediate casualty for the consumer. I mean, Apple just quietly killed the $599 base Mac Mini.
Yeah, they had to.
All right, so if you want a desktop Mac now to run your daily tasks, the entry point is $799. Because Apple uses unified memory, meaning the RAM is baked directly into the chip, they're uniquely exposed to these price hikes. The affordable entry point for computing is just vanishing simply because the raw materials are too expensive.
It's wild. The cost of the physical layer is completely rewriting consumer tech. But what's genuinely alarming, I think, is the internal corporate friction this is causing behind the scenes.
What do you mean?
Well, take OpenAI. The numbers from last year show they actually missed their internal revenue and user growth targets. They completely failed to reach their goal of 1 billion weekly active users. User growth is stalling out.
Okay, wait. I don't buy the strategy here then. Sam Altman is pushing a $600 billion data center commitment while his user growth is actually cooling off.
Yep.
I mean, in almost any other industry, a corporate board would fire a CEO for proposing a $500 billion infrastructure bet when the core software product is missing its revenue targets.
And his own board directors are actively questioning it. The CFO is ringing alarm bells, warning that rising compute costs are going to entirely outrun their incoming revenue. But, Altman is operating on a completely different premise here.
Which is what?
He's making a very calculated, almost cynical business bet based on compute scarcity. The thesis is that whoever controls the physical data centers holds the keys to the entire future economy, regardless of whether, the ChatGPT app hits its quarterly subscriber targets. It's just a massive land grab.
Wow. But money is just one constraint, right?
Right.
Even if you have $700 billion to spend, you can't just plug these AI factories into the existing local power grid.
Oh no, the grids would melt, literally.
Right. The infrastructure requires so much energy that tech companies are having to invent completely new ways to power the physical world. And we're seeing extreme desperation for electricity. I mean, Meta just signed a deal with a startup called Overview Energy for 1 gigawatt of space solar power.
Yeah, space solar.
I read that headline and assumed it was a typo. They literally want to gather sunlight using satellites orbiting the Earth and beam the electricity back down to their data centers. 1 gigawatt is the equivalent of a nuclear reactor.
I know, it sounds totally absurd until you look at the physics and the macroeconomics of it all.
Okay, explain that.
Well, on Earth, solar power is intermittent. You have weather, you have nighttime. But in orbit, a solar array collects energy 247 with 0 atmospheric interference and beams it down via microwaves to a receiver station. Meta is looking to space because the earthly grid is completely maxed out.
That is wild.
But energy is still only half the battle. You also have to physically build these massive facilities, which requires human labor that just doesn't exist at this scale.
Which completely explains the massive pivot into robotics we're seeing this week. SoftBank just launched a $100 billion robotics company called Roze, specifically to build data centers.
Yep, $100 billion.
They want to bundle energy acquisition, land purchases, and industrial robotics to fully automate the construction of AI factories. We are literally building machines to build the factories that house the machines.
It's very sci-fi, and the physical expansion is accelerating everywhere.
Right.
We're watching a full-blown race for humanoid robots. Like a company called 1X just opened a 58,000 square foot factory in California.
Right, for the NEO humanoids.
Exactly. They're aiming to mass produce 100,000 of their NEO humanoid robots a year by 2027. And look at Meta again. They just bought a startup called Assured Robot Intelligence specifically to acquire a technology called eFlesh.
Okay, let's unpack the mechanics of eFlesh because it sounds like a sci-fi horror movie, but it's actually a massive breakthrough in physical computing, right?
Yeah, the name is terrible, but the tech is incredible. It's a tactile sensor system. Until now, robots have had a terrible time manipulating delicate objects because they lack a sense of touch. They just crush things.
Right.
But the eFlesh technology uses these 3D printable microstructures that physically deform when they press against an object. Sensors read those deformations, giving the robot a really nuanced, high-fidelity sense of touch.
So a robot can finally feel the difference between, like, an egg and a baseball.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Meta is folding this directly into their superintelligence labs.
So Meta basically wants to be the Android operating system of humanoids. Like, they supply the intelligence layer, the brain, and the nervous system, while companies like 1X or Boston Dynamics build the actual metal and plastic bodies.
That's the play.
We saw Google run this exact playbook with smartphones 10 years ago, letting Samsung build the hardware while they dominated the software.
It's the exact same strategy, translating digital dominance into physical automation. And actually, speaking of smartphones, OpenAI is reportedly building their own.
Wait, really?
Yeah, they are slated for a 2028 release, and they're partnering with MediaTek, Qualcomm, and Luxshare for the manufacturing.
Okay, but why pivot back to a phone? For years, the AI industry has been trying to kill the smartphone. We had all those failed experiments like the Humane AI pin and the Rabbit R1. Why is OpenAI suddenly capitulating to the traditional glass rectangle?
Because the concept of an ambient, screenless AI agent completely failed in the real world.
Yeah, they're pretty terrible.
Right. To truly provide an AI that acts on your behalf, the system must intimately understand your real-time physical state. A lapel pin just doesn't have the battery life or the sensor suite to track your location, your eye movements, your daily routines, and your deep communication logs.
So the phone is sort of the ultimate sensory organ for the digital world.
Exactly. To dominate AI, you have to own the glass rectangle in the user's pocket.
But, the moment you start launching space satellites, mass-producing 100,000 humanoids, and putting global tracking hardware in everyone's pockets, you cross a major threshold. You're no longer just an internet application.
No, you're a geopolitical asset.
Exactly, you hit physical borders. And the regulatory walls are slamming down hard right now.
They really are. For a long time, AI was just code. It flowed freely across borders. Now, governments view it as critical national infrastructure. We saw a stunning example of this with China blocking Meta's $2 billion acquisition of an AI startup called Manus.
I genuinely don't understand how this works mechanically. I mean, Manus is technically based in Singapore, even though it was owned by a Chinese parent company.
Right.
And Meta had already absorbed the Manus staff. They had already cut the checks to the Chinese investors, including Tencent. The deal was closed. How does Beijing step in and unring that bell after the money has changed hands?
Well, the National Development and Reform Commission in China, the NDRC, has immense extraterritorial reach over any company with Chinese ownership ties.
Oh.
Yeah, they simply ordered the Chinese parent company to withdraw, effectively holding the domestic assets and executives hostage until the deal was reversed. It's a raw display of geopolitical leverage.
So it's not really about the tech startup itself.
No, most analysts view this as Beijing securing a bargaining chip ahead of the upcoming summit between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping. They are hoarding AI assets for diplomatic leverage.
And the U.S. is playing the exact same tit-for-tat game.
Yeah.
2 U.S. House committees just opened probes into companies like Airbnb and the makers of the cursor coding tool.
Yes, I saw that.
The accusation is that these U.S. platforms are using Chinese AI models, specifically Kimi and Quinn, under the hood. But how does a congressional committee even audit the API calls of a travel booking site?
It is incredibly difficult, maybe impossible, to untangle the digital supply chain. When you use an AI tool, it often routes your prompt through secondary and tertiary models to find the cheapest or fastest answer.
Right.
The U.S. government is trying to legally mandate that American companies cannot route data through models trained in adversarial nations. They're basically trying to police the nationality of mathematics.
Which is wild. And then you have Europe throwing massive regulatory wrenches into the physical rollout, too.
Oh, Europe is always busy.
Yeah. The EU just ordered Google to open up the Android operating system to AI rivals. Currently, Google's Gemini gets special, deep system-level access on Android phones. The EU is stripping Gemini of that gatekeeper status, forcing Google to let other AIs integrate just as deeply into the hardware.
Which is a huge blow. And they are also threatening Meta with a catastrophic fine up to 6% of their entire global turnover.
6%?
Yeah, the European Commission ruled that Meta is failing to properly identify and block underage users, basically allowing kids to bypass age restrictions with fake birthdays. So you have the US, China, and the EU all trying to strangle different parts of the AI supply chain.
Yeah. And, when a technology requires gigawatts of power, billions in rare earth materials, and causes international diplomatic incidents, it inevitably attracts the military.
It always does.
Which takes us to the ultimate physical collision, the militarization of AI. The Pentagon just signed massive agreements with 7 major tech giants. We're talking SpaceX, OpenAI, Google, NVIDIA, Microsoft, AWS, and Reflection. They are bringing these AI models directly onto the Defense Department's classified networks at impact levels 6 and 7.
Let's define those levels, because it really shows how serious this is.
Go for it.
Impact Level 6 deals with information classified up to the secret level. Impact Level 7 goes up to top secret and special access programs. The Pentagon is explicitly stating that this is the foundation for an AI-first fighting force.
Wow.
They aren't just using ChatGPT to write emails, they want these models doing massive data synthesis, analyzing satellite imagery, and driving situational decision-making across all domains of warfare.
And we have to impartially report on the severe internal fallout this is causing. At Google, roughly 600 employees signed an open letter directly protesting CEO Sundar Pichai.
Yeah, that's a big deal internally.
They are demanding that Google reject this Pentagon deal. They're arguing that leadership is completely abandoning the company's 2018 AI principles, where Google explicitly pledged not to use its technology for weapons or mass surveillance.
The workforce is deeply fractured over this. You have engineers who signed up to organize the world's information suddenly realizing their code is being deployed on top-secret military networks.
Yeah.
But the most bizarre dynamic in this entire defense rollout involves Anthropic.
Oh, this is the most fascinating paradox of the week. Anthropic is completely absent from that massive Pentagon deal.
Yep.
They had a huge dispute with the Defense Department because Anthropic flat out refused to allow military use of their tools. And because they wouldn't play ball, the Pentagon actually labeled Anthropic a supply chain risk, barring them from being used by defense contractors.
Right, so they took a hard ethical stance and got blacklisted by the military. But simultaneously, and here's the paradox, the White House blocked Anthropic from expanding its new Mythos model to corporate users.
Wait, why?
Anthropic wanted to give early access to about 70 private companies. But U.S. officials stepped in and halted it, claiming the Mythos model is so exceptionally good at detecting and exploiting software vulnerabilities that it could enable dangerous cyber attacks. The government is basically terrified that if the private sector gets it, it compromises the government's own use of the model.
So Anthropic is trapped in this geopolitical purgatory. They are considered too dangerously capable to be released to the private sector, but they are too uncooperative to be allowed in the military sector. They're literally being squeezed by the state from both ends.
It's a tough spot to be in. And, while the nations fight over how to control the technology, the corporations themselves are locked in courtroom warfare.
Right, Elon Musk.
Yeah. Musk is currently testifying in a federal trial against OpenAI and Sam Altman over claims they broke their original nonprofit mission.
And during his testimony, Musk actually admitted under oath that his own AI company, xAI, used a technique called distillation on OpenAI's models to train their own AI, Grok.
Which is a huge admission.
Yeah. For anyone unfamiliar, distillation basically means you use the highly sophisticated outputs of a massive model, like GPT-4, to teach and train a smaller, newer model. It's an open secret in Silicon Valley, but admitting it under oath essentially confirms that everyone is cannibalizing everyone else's data just to survive.
The corporate alliances are just disintegrating right now. For years, Microsoft and OpenAI had an incredibly tight, exclusive cloud computing partnership. That was the bedrock of the whole AI boom.
Right.
But OpenAI just ended Microsoft's right of first refusal to serve as their primary compute provider. They instantly turned around and launched their models on Amazon AWS.
Okay.
They are completely rewriting the corporate alliances of the entire industry simply because they're so desperate for more physical compute. Nobody has enough servers.
If you step back and look at the entire landscape we just covered, the main takeaway is profound. The era of cheap, cloud-based AI experimentation is dead. We have entered a brutally physical, heavy industry era. It's defined by $725 billion price tags, RAM memory shortages that are hiking the price of consumer laptops, gigawatts of space solar power beamed down to Earth, and top-secret classified military defense networks. AI is no longer just a software product, It is a geopolitical weapon.
Which leaves us with a really critical new angle to consider here. If the absolute minimum cost of entry for the next generation of artificial intelligence requires a space solar array, a multi-billion-dollar robotic supply chain, and a Pentagon-level classified clearance, what happens to the independent developer? We've always believed in this myth of the kid in the garage building the next big thing. But if the raw materials for intelligence are this fiercely guarded and outrageously expensive, we might be witnessing the permanent locking of the gates. The open source community might just be completely priced out of the future.
It's a chilling thought. The magic software we thought we had, floating weightlessly in the cloud, turned out to be the heaviest machine ever built. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the physical infrastructure behind the sleek interfaces you use every single day. We'll catch you next time.
That concludes our weekly forensic briefing. The strategic signal for this week is the physical manifestation. Artificial intelligence is no longer confined to the cloud. It is dictating the global supply of memory chips, powering humanoid robots in Californian factories, and integrating directly into the Pentagon's classified warfighter networks. As OpenAI moves to build its own smartphone and Meta attempts to become the android of robotics, the tech giants are realizing that software dominance is not enough. You must control the physical hardware and the energy that powers it. If you want to own your infrastructure instead of being managed by it, head over to jamgamind.com/toolkit for the AI Executive Toolkit. And as a special bonus for the DJAMGAMIND community, you can get exclusive discount codes for Google Workspace and Etienne's personal pro apps. You can find the link to email us directly in the show notes below to claim them today. This episode was made possible exclusively by DJAMGAMIND. Subscribe to DJAMGAMIND on Apple Podcasts to always listen completely ads-free. I am Anna. Stay sharp and keep unraveling the future.
And before you go, if your company is building the tools that power the workflows we talked about today, I'd love to showcase them to this audience. We don't just run ads, we build technical simulations that prove your value. Let's build something together. Visit jamgamind.com/partners to get started. Until next time, keep building.